Welcome to the Property Finance Podcast. So 4 weeks in a row. So we've managed to do a whole month worth of content without me disappearing again, which is always nice. So today I want to talk about knowing your figures. So we've covered the hurdles and challenges. We've covered the do's and don'ts of development finance. We've covered getting your team in place. And I think the fourth one to celebrate a month of consistency should be knowing your figures. So one of the biggest things that we get as development finance brokers and as bridging brokers as well is confusion over numbers, I think, a lot of the time. So we will get deals in, we'll have a look at them, whether it be a development finance deal, whether it be a refurb, whether it be a bridge, and we'll get a deal in and we'll look at it, we'll analyse it. And obviously we've got kind of 7-8 years worth of experience of dealing with these deals on a day-to-day basis. We've seen everything you can probably imagine in that time. So what happens is we get the deal in, we'll analyse it, we'll have a look at it, we'll run it through the calculators, and we'll come back with some questions. And 9 times out of 10, what will happen is we'll come back with questions and clients either won't know the answers, they'll have to go and check with builders, contractors, whatever. But there'll be some confusion over their numbers. So what I wanted to cover in a really quick podcast episode, this one's going to be a little bit shorter than some of the others, is just a really quick explanation as to what numbers you need to know and how you can know them. So the first one, when it comes to your build costs, we don't mind getting back of fag packet numbers by any stretch of the imagination. We don't mind them coming in and being X amount pound per square foot, X amount pound per square metre, that's fine. When it comes to getting them submitted to lenders, they have to be spot on. They've got to be QS level numbers. They've got to be broken down. You've got to show your contingencies. You've got to show all your breakdown of your landscapings, your externals, your management, your prelims, your amount to get you to third lift, the amount you're spending on scaffolding, your masonry, gable ends, or whatever you call them. I don't pretend to be a builder. All these different things that you've got to show. You haven't got to label it down to a penny per brick. It's got to be, right, okay, we're putting in an access road, that's going to be 20 grand. We need management costs, that's going to be 8 grand a month, whatever the figures are. So you've got to have an understanding of those numbers. And it's not even just for the lender's perspective, it's for you as well as the developer, whether you're taking on the contracting role, whether you're taking on a project management role, whether you're taking on almost a basic QS role, whatever it may be. You need to have an understanding of those numbers because you need to be able to cash flow yourself for the next 12, 18 months. And you can bring that down to the level of refurbs or small investment properties as well, because even if you're only spending 20 grand on a property as opposed to £2 million, 20 grand is still a lot of money, and you've got to be able to manage that 20 grand. Because if a builder disappears off halfway through, or a builder gets to the end of it and goes, actually, I've spent 35 grand rather than 20 grand, finding that missing money can really do some damage. So you've really got to have an understanding of those build costs and what you're spending, where you're spending it. Are you spending enough? Is there enough contingency? Are you going to be okay? So build cost is the first one to understand. Then know your figures around your purchase as well, because the amount of deals we get, especially on development finance, where the clients get to the purchase and then they go, I've got 50 grand's worth of stamp duty that I didn't know about. I've got VAT that I didn't know about. Do I have to pay my stamp duty straight away? Do I have to pay the VAT straight away? Can I claim the VAT back? Can I claim the stamp duty back? Can I get anything reduced on the stamp duty? There's all these numbers, and you just think, well, how have you gotten all the way through to the purchase without knowing those numbers? So on the purchase, make sure you understand, is there VAT applicable? If you're doing a commercial conversion and you're buying a commercial premises, is there VAT applicable? Are you able to set that VAT off? Is there any way of getting the vendor to sort of get rid of the VAT somehow? Speak to a VAT specialist. You can tell by the tone of my voice and the way I'm speaking, I don't know about VAT, and I don't pretend to know about VAT. Speak to a VAT specialist. Then when it comes to stamp duty, speak to your solicitor, understand whether there's anything you can do to defer any of the stamp duty, whether you can get the stamp duty reduced. Is there multiple dwellings relief, which obviously has just been knocked off fairly recently. Well, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, could have been knocked off quite some time ago. But speak to a good solicitor. There's also companies like Cornerstone, for example, who do stamp duty relief as well. So they look at your stamp duty, see if you're paying too much stamp duty. Is there a way of paying less stamp duty? Have a look at them as well. But there's all these different numbers within the purchase that you need to be aware of. What are your legal costs? Are your legal costs going to destroy you on the way through? Are you going to be paying 10 grand for legal costs, 20 grand for legal costs, 5 grand for legal costs? What's it going to be? So understanding the numbers on your purchase are massive. Understand your numbers on your sale as well. So speak to a good accountant. How much tax are you going to have to pay when you sell the property? Do you have to hold it for a couple of years first to then try and reduce your capital gains tax outlay? Again, I'm not an accountant, so all of these different words I'm saying, I've got no idea what I'm referring to. So get good accountancy and tax advice, because at the back end, you're going to need to know what you can do with the money, the profits, all of that sort of thing. Also with the accountant as well, get them involved in the VAT as well. So we've mentioned on previous episodes about changing VAT to monthly drawdowns if you're doing a refurb and development, because obviously it helps your cash flow. So all of these different numbers you need to know and you need to be in control of. And that is absolutely key. You need to be in control of these numbers from the outset. So accountant, speak to Cornerstone about stamp duty, also speak to your solicitor about stamp duty, and obviously anything to do with VAT and whatnot as well. So you understand your purchase numbers, understand your sale numbers, understand your build costs as well. The last set of figures that you need to get under control and understand as well is your financing figures. Obviously, that's where a broker comes in. So obviously, that's where we will talk you through all of your numbers. What are your arrangement fees? What's your interest rate? What are your default fees if you end up going over? Are you paying interest? If you're doing development finance, for example, is there a non-utilisation fee? As a rule of thumb, we have never in 8 years, 7-8 years, dealt with a development finance lender that charges non-utilisation. So non-utilisation fee is where you don't utilise the facility, so they charge you for obviously holding that money back. If they do charge non-utilisation, I would look at going somewhere else personally, because those fees could destroy a deal instantaneously. So make sure you understand your arrangement fees, your interest rate, your default fees, everything you can possibly know about that finance. You need to get your head around. Don't just rely on your broker to do you a set of numbers and then kind of run with it, because 9 times out of 10, if you sort of fully rely on that broker, you're going to get halfway through the development finance and then you're going to go, well, what happens now? What am I paying here? What am I doing there? It becomes a real issue. So make sure from that perspective that you're in control of those numbers as well. Work with your broker, sit down with your broker, go and have a meeting with your broker, sit down, get the AIP in front of you, read through the AIP, have a look at YouTube as well, my YouTube, because we're going to put out at the moment the Property Finance Academy course. So initially it was a paid course. I then looked at it and thought, well, actually, I don't want to put this out as paid anymore. This is content that I want to be free. So we put that course out, and then one of those is talking about how to understand an agreement in principle, how to understand a set of offers. So keep an eye on that. That'll be one of the modules that comes out, Advanced Bridging Finance and Advanced Development Finance. But that will go through an AIP and an offer letter in more detail. But sit with your broker, understand the numbers, understand what happens when things go wrong as well, because if you're on an 18-month term, for example, if you get to the 17th, 18th month, you need to understand what you're going to be hit with. Are there extension fees? Are there default fees? Are you going to end up having to pay another 5% arrangement fee to extend the loan for another 3 months? Are you going to end up going on to a default interest rate of 3% a month? You need to understand these figures because they can really destroy a deal. So sometimes you might look at a development finance deal and it might be 1% a month, but there might be 3, 5, 10% arrangement fees at the back end for an extension, or the default interest rate might go to 3, 5, 8, whatever percent. But the 1% a month is looking all right. There might be another development lender who might be 1.1% a month, but they might not have any default fees. They might not have any extension fees. They might work with you. They might be like, well, actually, we'll let you have a 3-month grace period. So at the end of 18 months, you can have another 3 months without penalty. Yes, they're more expensive, but actually they could be better for you in the long run if it's your first project, for example. So knowing your numbers isn't just about looking at the headline numbers. It's about really diving deep into all of these numbers, understanding everything, almost to the level of being a QS yourself. You need to be at that level where you understand every pound, penny, cent that's going into this deal, because if you don't understand all of those numbers, you could get into this and be in some real trouble. So when it comes to knowing your figures, be that level of QS, understand all your numbers, to have a stupidly big spreadsheet. It doesn't matter, but get to know those figures inside out. Even if the deal doesn't go ahead, it's an incredible exercise to go through to understand your numbers. And that is my rant about knowing your figures. But hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. Hopefully this has been really, really helpful. I know personally for me, this was a big one. I wanted to get the information out there about knowing your figures, because it's one of the biggest things that we have come back to us again and again and again is a misunderstanding of what the numbers on a deal actually are. But hopefully you've enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the next one.